Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. I am excited to be here today with my co-host, Mary. How you doing, Mary?
Doing terrific.
Excellent, excellent. We have another interesting guest lined up, I am sure. So why don't you do the honors and introduce them?
I will. But before we do, how are you doing today? I didn't even get to ask you.
I am great. How could I not be great if I'm hanging out with you for a little while?
That's awesome. I love hearing that. So today we have David Reske. He's the CEO of NowSpeed, a digital marketing agency with offices in Boston and Toronto. Interesting. He's also a professor at Boston College, where he teaches a course in business planning, and he's the author of the book, Digital Marketing in the Zone. Additionally, he's the host of a podcast, Marketing in the Now, or in the Know, in the Now, which has produced 100 episodes to share his experiences. David, welcome to the Prime Life podcast. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to.
Mary and Joseph, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here and share some of my experience with your listeners. Some of my background, I've been a digital marketing professional for about 30 years. I started my first company called Onward Technologies, the beginning of the commercial internet in 1994. And so we started building websites in the 90s. I grew that company up to about 50 people, and we sold it to a very large systems integration firm. That was a great learning experience because I had a sales background in technology before that, but I took this leap of faith. I was actually in a business planning course myself, wrote a business plan called Online Computer Market, and decided to go for it. Started my first company and got it off the ground, and didn't earn a salary for a year. That was a little challenging, but we got it off the ground. Eventually, it was successful, and we sold it. I was a senior partner with the buyer for a little while, and then started this company, NowSpeed Marketing, in 2003. I've been running this for over 20 years, and we do things like help build websites, do SEO, digital advertising, things that help companies grow their business. So I've been around the internet marketing and for a long, long time. So it's been a great experience.
Well, congratulations on your successes so far and potentially in the future. Tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial experience getting to this point. Like, what have you learned? What tips do you have for people? Sort of you've sold a company or exited a company. What did you learn there in that process that might help people who are probably getting to the point in their lives, if they own a business, and selling them or exiting them in one way or another?
Sure. So, I've learned a lot about buying and selling companies. I've sold my company. I bought several other companies along the way. So you learn a lot when you buy and you sell a company. So in selling a company, you learn that you have to package your company so that it's valuable to the buyer. So, if some of your listeners are running, businesses and they want to eventually sell it, you have to really create a system and you have to create the systems and process so the business doesn't just revolve around you. It revolves around the brand or the product or whatever that your business is all about. So I had to do a lot of that with my first company. Fortunately, when you're at 50 people, you have to have all that. So we had directors and managers who were running. We packaged services, and you have all those systems and process in place. And that makes it valuable for the buyer, because when the buyer buys the business, as the seller, I don't want to stick around forever. I want to, take that money and do something else with my life. Usually that's what the buyers want to do. So anyway, that's a couple things I learned as the seller. As the buyer, I learned that there's a wide variety of people that are trying to sell their businesses, but there's a way to value a business that is clear in every industry. So in marketing services, the area that we're in, we value businesses based on the amount of profit that you're making, or we call it EBITDA. So we're looking at earnings before interest and taxes. So you look at a business and you would value it at a multiple of earnings. And based on the growth rate of the company and the quality of the company and those kinds of things. But there always has to be enough there that it can survive without the founder. So it's very difficult to buy a firm with 1, 2, or 3 people that's highly dependent on the founder. You got to have a business that's large enough to survive without the founder. Because in some cases, I've done acquisitions where the founder stays, and that's fantastic, and I love it, and then we thrive with the founder fitting into NowSpeed. In other cases, the buyer leaves right away. You have to have enough value there to maintain that company. So learned a lot about buying and selling companies. And, as I think about that, all of those experiences, whether it's starting my company, growing my company, selling it, buying other companies, all of this really fits into my personal life plan. So I know not all of your listeners are entrepreneurs or running companies, but I think of these, events in my life as part of my personal life plan. There's a lot of things to help to think about planning my life and setting goals and objectives. And these are the things that help me get to where I want to be in life so that I can live my life the best that I possibly can. My life is not my company. It's really just a part of my company, a part of my life. And then I'm really, all about planning as happy and successful a life as I can. And my company is really an enabler of all of that.
So I have 2 questions. The first question is, how has marketing changed in the time that you've been involved in it? And has anything surprised you? And the second question really is, you were talking about, learning all the ins and outs of buying a business and selling it and living a balanced life, right? Which I think is so important. And I think that you're alluding to this. So those individuals that are thinking about starting a business maybe later on in life, and we've had guests on that fit that bill, what can you share with our audience that would be helpful to them in terms of, what do I do first? What do I do second? Should I be afraid? What don't I know? Those kinds of things.
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
Nassau is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Oh, those are 2 great questions, Mary. So I'll tackle the first one about what in marketing has changed in the last 30 years. What hasn't changed in the last 30 years? Oh my goodness. When I started 30 years ago, people were excited about direct mail, and they were doing catalog advertising, and we're trying to figure out how to be in the next trade publication, and everything has changed in marketing in the last 30 years. I mean, there's still television. The great thing about marketing is nothing ever really goes away. We're still doing television. We're still doing radio. We're still doing direct mail, still doing trade publications, but it's added all this other stuff, search marketing, SEO, website design and development, e-commerce, and now AI, right? Social media, of course, content marketing, and AI. So one of the big changes is that every firm now is a publisher. We're all publishing content, creating podcasts, getting our expertise out there. And we're doing all this because the buying process has changed. So people don't buy the way they used to in the past, especially in B2B. You talk to a sales rep. Sales rep had all the knowledge and information. Now everybody wants to get their own knowledge and information. So, but I could talk endlessly about what's changed in marketing. We're wrestling with AI right now and trying to figure out where that's going, and that's going to be an exciting journey. And we can talk a lot more about that. Let me get to your second question, which is advice for people that are starting their business. I think it's never too late to start a business. I think entrepreneurs can come at any age, and I think it's exciting that some of your listeners are really thinking about businesses to start. I teach a course on business planning, of course, at Boston College, and so I've thought a lot about what it takes to plan a business, and I think that it's much easier to build a business if you planned it correctly and you've executed it. Just jumping in without a lot of knowledge, without a lot of planning, is foolish, right? So you could be lucky, and get a big client or hit a home run product or make a lot of money because you corner the market in something. And it's great to be lucky. And luck, I don't underestimate luck. Luck is super important in a lot of ways. I feel like in many ways, I think of myself as a lucky person because why not? Right? So I like thinking of myself as a lucky person. That said, it's way easier and it's a lot less stressful if you have a plan. So, and when you're writing a business plan, you start with a market analysis, right? What is the market? Who are my competitors? What's the product environment? What's the growth rate? What's the industry characteristics? You do all that, then you figure out the product. What am I selling? How do I make it? How do I distribute it? How much does it cost to make? Who do I hire? Right? You got to build the product. Then you need a marketing plan, a marketing and sales plan. You have to figure out how do I sell it? How do I get buyers for it? Build that marketing and sales plan. And I love taking my students through those three phases, right? With the product, the market opportunity, the marketing sales plan. And then I ask them to build a financial plan. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? So I give them a template for a spreadsheet and they figure out the numbers. And the numbers are always exciting because some students will come back and say, I can build this amazing company doing this fantastic product. And in the first year, I'm going to generate well over $1,000 in revenue. And I look at them and say, well, that's not a business, that's a hobby. That's, you're doing $100 a month in revenue to get to $1,000 in a year. You probably are, unless you're going to hit that hockey stick later, it's not really. So what I'm saying is putting the theory into numbers helps you figure out the scale and the opportunity that you're really going after. Other clients build some phenomenal spreadsheet and create a math calculation, and they get to $100 million in revenue in a year, and they're like, "Yeah, of course it's going to take off," and they're also probably unrealistic. But anyway, so it's really a structured process, and there's a lot of material out there on how to write a business plan. But I would highly encourage any of the budding entrepreneurs out there to write a business plan. Don't have to be a novelist to do this, but think through all the elements and get that plan on paper. Because then when things don't go as planned, you know how to pivot. You know what you're pivoting, and you know where you need to work on things to fix them to get where you want to go.
So I have a few comments. First, I'm a huge fan of direct mail. I spent a good chunk of my career doing direct marketing. Still a fan. You talked about planning. It reminded me of that old adage: those who fail to plan to fail. So I agree with you 100% on that. And then also on the valuing of the company. So I spent a good chunk of my most recent career in the startup space, and in the startup ecosystem, everyone's always talking about the valuation of a company. And a smart person said to me, he says, it doesn't really matter what the value of your company is if you have no cash to run that business. So I think when people are thinking about the value of their company, they really need to add another element or dimension, which is, do they need that money now? Could they sell their company tomorrow for a greater valuation? Is it going to go up or down? What you have now, you may not have tomorrow. So there's a lot to that. I mean, obviously you've seen a lot more than I have in working with companies. I guess my question to you at this point in this conversation would be is, what are the challenges that someone might have that's, starting a business later in life versus someone who's starting a business earlier in their career? Is there anything unique or different?
So, yeah, if you're starting later in your career, and I think about this because, I'm later in my career and I think, do I want to start another business and make that happen? I think you do have to think about the element of time. And I think everybody should be thinking about work-life balance, because often later in your career, you might have other priorities. You may not want to work. My daughter right now is in a marketing research AI startup, and she's working 80 hours a week. And I don't think it's good for her. That's the fatherly advice. But she's doing it, and they're going to be very successful in making this happen. And later in your career, you may not have the energy or desire to do that. So you got to set boundaries in your life. You got to understand how this fits into your work-life balance and your personal goals. And so I think a lot about goal setting and core values and planning and all of that. So I think that is number one. You got to figure out, and then you got to figure out the time horizon that you got. If you're 50, you've got a huge amount of time, in my opinion. I think, if you're 50 or 55, if you're 60, you've got a lot of time to figure this out. You could be working for another 10, 15, 20 years, right? So I think that one of the things that more experienced or older entrepreneurs do is they think that they don't have as much time, and they do. And so most people do. And so I think that should try to take that excuse away from most people, and think about, putting the right perspective on. But I think that the other advantage, though, the significant advantage that older entrepreneurs have is experience. And if you've had experience, especially in an industry, don't underestimate that, because, often what young entrepreneurs have is a little bit of that chutzpah, naivete. And actually that helped me in my first company. If I knew everything that I needed to do to start that company, I would have never done it, because I was naive, totally naive. I was going into a new industry, didn't understand it. But if I'm starting it now, I understand it much better. If I was going to start another digital ad agency, I could hit the ground running very quickly because I understand all the pieces. So leverage that experience, hit the ground running. I would encourage them to do things they understand well, and to leverage that experience. If you're in one industry, it's hard to start something in a totally different industry. Get some experience first, but leverage that experience that you got. It's much easier to be successful.
I'll just add two related ideas. One is your network is much deeper at later in life, so you have all these people you can tap for experience, but also your trustworthiness, your social capital, call it what you want, is probably stronger as well. And so you may be able to build partnerships or raise money more easily than someone who's 21, 22, who doesn't have any of that yet built up. So that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're if you have been an entrepreneur multiple times already, it's easier, I think, to do it. Where all the pieces, how the pieces fit together. You understand all of that. But at any age, I think it's important to do your homework, get some, talk to people, build a business plan, and figure out how you're going to make money at it. Don't get so passionate about the idea that you just assume it's going to make money because it's great, right? You got to figure out how you're going to make money. And I think the other part of it, though, is super important, is figure out what your goals are. Are you trying to build a $100 million company that's going to go public and change the world, or are you trying to create a 30-year lifestyle business where you can work part-time and have a great income, right? So figure out where your goals are, and then apply the resources and the plan appropriately.
Now, very good advice and interesting. And so, David, I don't know if I shared with you, I am a former entrepreneur, and that was many years ago. And I agree with you that the naivete is actually a bonus most of the time, because if you knew sometimes what you were really getting into, maybe you would hesitate per se. But I also do find you just brought up a really good point most recently that especially those that are thinking about retirement, maybe that are in retirement, if they want to put together a business that they can work on part-time to generate revenue, income, why not? However, I think when we're thinking about, taking our money that we have and investing it in a business, hopefully you're not stretching so much that when perhaps things don't go exactly as planned, that it becomes problematic and more of a significant burden. I do believe in luck. I also believe in hard work. I think it's always a combination of the two. And I like that you brought that up earlier because
Yeah,
sometimes go ahead.
I was just to add to that. I think that as entrepreneurs are thinking about their businesses, what I've learned is that some businesses are much easier to start than others, and some businesses have significantly more risk than others. So if you're,
Agree.
my age, 60 plus, and you're thinking about starting a new business, and you're thinking about taking, your entire retirement savings and chunking it into brick and mortar
Mhm.
on an unproven idea that you don't really have a market for, that's a lot of risk.
Mhm.
It's a lot of risk. There's a lot of business models. I think that one of the most underappreciated parts about starting a business is understanding the business model. Really, how do
Mhm.
you kind of take the money that you're investing, invest as little as possible to get the greatest return? In some areas, it's really easy to do that. So let's say you're a management consultant and you've had 30 years or 40 years of experience in management consulting. Well, it's really easy then to have zero investment. You make a phone call, you get your CEO buddy to hire you at $300 an hour, and you're suddenly making a lot of money. This is a great thing to do, right? So no downside to doing that. And at the other end of the spectrum, you're creating a store. It's a large store, and you've got to invest in the build out and do the lease, and it's a 10-year lease, and you've got to do brick and mortar and do inventory. Those kind of businesses require a lot of capital. And so you've got to figure out what's in my view, the better business models require less capital. They're cash generating as opposed to cash using. They're highly profitable. And, if you can figure out those three things, cash generating versus cash using, less capital up front, and incidentally, if it requires fewer employees, it's easier. There's a more leverage through contractors or vendors. It's just way easier. You have less commitment. So I think looking at those four characteristics hard before you get so enamored with one particular business idea is really super important for budding entrepreneurs.
So I have a
No, those are all great points. Sorry. Go ahead,
Oh,
Joseph.
sorry, Mary. We have a little internet connection today. I was just going to ask you earlier, you were talking about sort of your personal values and, the kind of business you might want to get into at this point. What advice do you have for our listeners on how to define their values? I mean, sometimes it's, what these are my values, but you're not necessarily stating them in a way that it can be used to compare and contrast different opportunities. So do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, every year I go through a very detailed personal planning process around that. So I have a lot of thoughts about that. But the way I start every year is I look at a bucket list. And you can Google this. There's lots of these on the internet, but get a list of questions to ask you about your bucket list. Don't just, come up with a bucket list. Call it a bucket list questions list. And so it's going to ask you a bunch of questions about what you want to, who you want to be when you grow up, what do you want to do, who you want to meet, what do you want to experience. Create that bucket list, right? And then start thinking about that. At the same time, then you can start, on the other hand, start thinking about your core values. And core values might be things like integrity, love, faith, family, fun, adventure, learning, right? All of those kind of core values. So what I do is every year is I look at that list of bucket list questions. I look at my core values. And then I look at a long-term plan. Where do I want to be in 5 years? I don't really think more than 5 years out. because I can't think that far, but you think out as far as you want. But where do you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years, right? You want to be retired. You want to be, have independence. You want to have a vacation home. Do you want to have a private jet? Where do you want to be? And then you kind of back up from there to for me, it's a 1-year plan, break it down to a quarterly plan, 1-year goals, 1-year plan, quarterly plan. And then I keep a weekly scorecard on how I'm doing against that plan. So it's a very structured process for me that helps me think about that. Some of it's an annual exercise, like the bucket list and core values and that annual plan. And then part of it's a weekly exercise, which is, hey, now that I have this plan, let me look at my scorecard and say, how am I doing on all these things? And I break my life down into 5 different areas. One I call mind, body, spirit. So how am I doing on, my physical goals? For me, that might be running or hiking or, other kinds of weight goals, right? That kind of thing. So physical goals, how many books do I want to read? And the other piece is relationships. Where do I want to be in terms of relationships? Where do I want to be in terms of fun? Where do I want to be in terms of my work and my professional life? And then the last category for me is assets, stuff, right? So I own, house and other things. And so I kind of think about how I want to evolve that. So those 5 areas allow me to kind of plan, what I'm doing. And then I look every week at a scorecard. I ask myself a series of probably like 20 questions. I know I'm probably overdosing on this stuff, but I ask myself like 20 questions every week to say, how am I doing against my, what I said I wanted to do? And that kind of keeps me honest.
That's great. That's a lot. So for those
It's a lot.
individuals, it's a lot.
I
So
know. Sorry.
no, don't apologize. I think it's wonderful that you do all of that. But for those individuals that may say what I just said, wow, that's a lot. I want to get started, but I don't know if I can do all of that. And so then they maybe won't start because it's overwhelming them. What do you suggest in terms of, as I like to call, baby steps?
Yeah, I'd take a few pieces of that. Start with these bucket list questions. Create your bucket list. Here are the 10 experiences I want to have before I die. Right, 20 experiences, 10, 5. Right, what do I want to do? I want to go to Yellowstone. Kind of always wanted to go fly fishing with my dad. Right, so create a list of that, and that's really simple. Right, and then have a few core values. I think the core values are helpful as a guide stone. Right, what do I know that is super important to me? And then just set some goals. Set a series of 1-year goals that will help keep you on track. And then once you have that, the last piece is look at it every week. Don't forget about it. Just look at it, and your mind will start to think about it and say, "Oh my gosh, I said I wanted to do this. I'm this kind of person. Kind of wanted to do these stuff this year," and your mind will start to create action plans and figure out how to do it. I think that's the beauty of the human mind. We figure out how to do things based on what we want to do. So start with those 3 goal setting things, and then just look at it once a week. Set aside 15 minutes, and your mind will get you on your way.
Do you recommend working with like a business coach or professional life coach to do those sort of things, or you think there's enough out there to do it on your own?
I think it depends on who you are. I think life coaches can be very helpful for many people, and I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I love doing it on my own because I kind of structure and I think about that. But I've been doing it for 10 years. This whole planning exercise process. So you might need to hire somebody to get you started, and then keep you moving. But then you're going to have to own it. One of my core values is extreme ownership, I call it, based on a book that I read called Extreme Ownership, which I'd highly recommend. And so I think eventually you can't depend on the coach for the next 20 years to keep you going the right direction. You got to own it. You got to decide what you're really all about, pick up the pieces and own it, and do it yourself. So helpful, get the coach if it helps you get started, but eventually you got to take responsibility and own it.
I don't know. It sounds to me like starting an exercise program. You have to do it regularly to some degree. You have to, get started. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to keep it front and center, and you need to do it pretty regularly. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a silly example that's working for me right now. So I've always been, I don't know if any of your listeners can relate to this. I've been a terrible flosser. I'm like a twice a week kind of guy, just enough so that my dentist doesn't yell at me too badly when I go to the dentist. And I went to the dentist like a week and a half ago, and I had like the normal difficult checkup, but it was okay. No cavities. My teeth are fine. I haven't had any major teeth issues. But I just decided, and got the normal pep talk on flossing. I just decided I'm going to floss every day now, every freaking day. So it's just changing my routine. And so and I'm only maybe 10 days into this, so you can hold me accountable a year from now. But that little change, hopefully, is going to pay big dividends for me long term, right?
Yeah.
So you got to start somewhere. You got to eventually got to decide what you want and what you want to be. I want to have my teeth the next, hopefully, 30 or 40 years. So this is a good step for me in the right direction. Sometimes these are small steps. Sometimes we have major steps, but you got to start somewhere.
This section brought to you by the American Dental Association.
No, I do love the flossing analogy, because it's amazing. In the last week or so, I don't know why this is, but I've talked to several people about flossing. No, seriously, I know I should floss every day and I don't. So I have to go for cleanings a little more frequently, but I run
Right.
into the same thing that, and my husband's obsessed with his teeth. He has these gorgeous white teeth, and he does whiten his teeth periodically, but he came with these very beautiful white teeth, and everyone asks him, "Are those your teeth, your real teeth?" And they are.
Parts included is what you're saying.
Exactly. So I love the teeth analogy, but I know we're kind of getting to the point where we need to kind of wrap things up, David. So, Joseph, is it okay if I ask David our last question? So we like to ask all of our guests. So you're you've done a lot of interesting things. You've bought businesses, sold them. You're professor, you teach others. You could wake up and do pretty much anything you want every day. What's your why? Why do you do what you do?
That's a good question. I really want to make a difference in the world. So my kind of my core values is I want to make a difference. So right now, because of my expertise and time, I've become a digital marketing expert. So I think in some ways you you get passionate about things that you're an expert on, and I'm an expert at running a company, running small companies. Don't ask me to run General Motors. I'm not going to do it well. Running small companies and digital marketing. So those are two things I do well, and I enjoy them. So that's that's a big part of my why. And then I really do all this so that I can enjoy life. So I have many hobbies: sailing, skiing, travel. I have this crazy quest to go to 100 countries, and I've done a ton of hiking. And so I have 4 kids, and so there's all these things I want to do in life, and I want to keep being healthy and have the resources to be able to experience those things. So that's a lot of my why that keeps me going every day.
All right, so you just opened the door for one last question. What's the most interesting country you've been to so far?
So many interesting countries. So we could have an entire podcast on this, which I'm sure you would enjoy.
Pick your favorite.
I did a solo road trip to Andorra, Liechtenstein, and Monaco, just because those were 3 countries in Western Europe I had not been to before. So what I've learned is that every little country and every little town in America and Europe has something interesting about it. So I went to Liechtenstein, which is not Austria. It's not Switzerland. It's little Liechtenstein, and had a blast. Great restaurants, phenomenal wineries, good hiking, had a really nice time. So that, I think that you could go to the Taj Mahal or you go to Liechtenstein. Depending on who you are, you can have a good time. So I don't know. I enjoy seeing it all.
So for people who want to learn more about your travels and your business and your advice, where could they get in touch with you?
Well, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. So David Reske, easy to find. You can find my company, nowspeed.com. My podcast is there. If you want to take a course at Boston College, you can see me there. But LinkedIn is the best place to find me, David Reske.
David, thank you for joining us on the Prime Life podcast. It's been great to chat with you. Joseph, as always, thank you for
Pleasure.
being my co-pilot. And for our listeners, we look forward to engaging with you next time on the Prime Life podcast. Everyone have a great day. And David, thanks again for joining Joseph and I today.
Thank you for having me.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.